America, where are the Patriots? We Americans have cowards and self-centered fools as our politicians in Washington, D.C. because they were aware of the ultimate outcome of such a runaway economy long before it became apparent to the average citizen. The politicians and the mainstream media did a pretty good job of keeping it from us. According to writer Tony Elliott, the bailout is part of the overall scheme by those in power who are directing events for an outcome of their choosing. It is the handful of individuals who some refer to as the Illuminati. This elite group of powerful people has been creating and directing events in America and world society ever since colonial days and in modern times as well. They have been responsible for the assassinations of Abraham Lincoln, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, and a number of world leaders. This group is also responsible for 9/11 and a host of terrorist attacks around the world. Unfortunately, for the most part, mainstream America's wishes has been shunned, even though there is a mounting patriotic interest as exemplified by the Ron Paul campaign, Ralph Nader and other independents. But there is still a lot of misunderstanding on the part of mainstream Americans regarding the economy and ultimately our money, if not the whole Illuminati-controlled monetary/political system. None of the created events they have manifested has been in the favor of our citizens. One really big thing they created was the Federal Reserve Bank, a so-called federal bank that controls all of our money since 1913, when legislation was passed giving the sometimes called Fed all the power they needed to control the capital of America. Other serious questions remain on all of the events. The Illuminati have had a hand in such events as the JFK assassination and the 9/11 attack, where more questions were raised than were ever answered as to who did it, why and how it was done. Elliott writes that these created events would not have any unanswered doubts at all if they were legitimate, because the proof would be clear-cut. As it is, we are presented with lies that cannot be clearly sorted out, because in hiding the true perpetrators and cause they have muddied the water to the point that even the most ill-informed and mind-busy with day-to-day living could see through the thin veil of deception. Again, we have been duped into believing that this government intervention of the entire financial market was necessary to avoid an outright depression. The actual act of the federal government bailing out Wall Street really is necessary to avoid a total catastrophe of bankruptcy of the free financial market. However, its plan is again flawed, as all its schemes in the past were, because we can clearly see the finagling that was going on behind the scenes over the past 8 years that brought us to this situation we now face. 9/11 was a hit to the financial world, as the Twin Towers were places where the nucleuses of the world's financial markets were housed. The 9/11 attacks were the beginning of a series of events that has brought us to the financial crisis we are now facing. This government within the government has painted us with a picture presenting us with an image of being saved by Uncle Sam from disaster, but the reality is the federal government will actually own all there is in our existence, making us slaves to its whims whenever it chooses. The Feds influence the market's outcome to what it is now through fear of terrorism on crude oil facilities around the world, embargoes of oil supplies by terrorist-supporting countries, and a volatile market operating on fears of massive deficits from the unnecessary wars stemming from the 9/11 attacks. The apocalypse of the world economy. Former President Roosevelt said, "The only thing we have to fear is fear itself." The coming economic collapse is something to prepare for, if not fear, for it will be the worst event in our lives, with or without the bailout. It will be much worse than the Great Depression and may last much longer. Bernard von Nothaus, known as the monetary architect, reports that while you hear the word collapse often today, rarely is there any real definition as to what happens in a collapse. Well, to paraphrase my presentation at the Silver Summit, the coming economic collapse will be a global monetary apocalypse that will mirror the fall of Rome and include the following: national currency controls, nationalization of major industries, layoffs, strikes, domestic strife, food shortages, massive unemployment, bankruptcies, greatly reduced standard of living, roadblocks, martial law, military troops at major intersections, passport and travel restrictions, a total lockdown of the country, until the masses cry out, "Give me anybody! Anybody who will bring sanity back to the monetary system." Rise of a dictator. And a totalitarian government. Just look at these historical experiences: France and the rise of Napoleon in the 1800s, Germany and the rise of Hitler in the 1930s and China and the rise of Mao in the 1940s. We are all going to be millionaires. In the same soup line during the coming hyperinflationary depression. Think this is impossible? Think martial law and military troops is too extreme? Google, the September 24, 2008, article on Prison Planet by Paul Joseph Watson. U.S. troops returning from duty in Iraq will be carrying out homeland patrols in America from October 1 in complete violation of Posse Comitatus for the purposes of helping with civil unrest and crowd control, which could include dealing with unruly Americans after a complete economic collapse. This shocking admission was calmly reported on September 8 on the Army Times website that from the beginning of next month the 3rd Infantry Division's 1st Brigade Combat Team will be under the day-to-day control of U.S. Army North, the Army Service component of Northern Command, as an on-call federal response force for natural or man